episode of Three Bridges Model Railway, where I'm building my first model railway layout for 45 years, based on a series of journeys that I've taken throughout my life and the stations I've used. So I'm on to station 2 now. So this is Amersham, still on the Chiltern line as it's known today. So this is the Great Midlands line that ran from way up in Sheffield down through Leicester, Rugby, Aylesbury, and then carried on all the way down to Marylebone. It was sort of the last, I think, of the last before North London stations, and it was never a very great success from the start, as you'll get to find out as we progress towards London. Anyway, Amersham's the end of the Metropolitan line today, so that's where the tube stops. And so the station at Amersham has sort of two functions. One is obviously the Chiltern line running through to Marylebone, but also you can jump on the tube there and head into the centre of London. So in this episode I thought I'd cover two things. So I'll introduce you to my loft and some of the dilemmas I'm having to sort of go through to work out how to put the fitter layout into the loft. As you'll see, there's a number of, I suppose, problems to solve with any loft layout, and I've certainly got a few with my own, as you'll see. And then the second bit, I'll start on the structure of Amersham Station and what I want to build and achieve by doing it. It's going to be slightly larger than the Wendover one, and I'm thinking of incorporating a bit more outside of just the immediate station that I did at Wendover. I want to try and see if I'm interested in actually is where do you position your station in a layout, I suppose is the question. So some people have a great scenic layout with a station or a train line running through it, whereas other people basically just model the train line. I'm trying to give you two really obvious examples of this. So if you take Everard Junction, yes, you've got a station and those four lines running through it, but Richard also models a lot of what you see around the station in terms of the streets nearby, the canal, the scrapyard, and so on. And so his takes on a greater sort of depth, I think, away from the railway line. Whereas you take Making Tracks, it's just the railway line. It literally ends at maybe at the station door and the fence, and for some of it is literally just the railway line, the catenary, but nothing else, maybe one house, but it's very much a different approach to doing it. And I'm trying to work out in my own head how far away from the railway line I want to model as things progress. So the idea with Amersham is to do a bit more and see if that is something that really interests me for further on in the layout. Okay, so welcome to the loft. So I'm still at one end, so it's a rectangular shape. To the far wall at the other end it's about 9.3 meters, and as you can see I've got the roof struts, so it's not an open planned roof in any way, and from that sort of corner strut there across to the other one it's about 3.2 meters. Okay, so I suppose that's the maximum width I'm thinking I can operate within. So it gives you, if you ran around the outer edge along the wall, around 22 meters of a circuit to go around one loop. And obviously I've got to work out how to fit a railway either in here into this gap between the struts or in the space in the middle. So where I stood in the sort of the middle part, you've got, is it 2.3 meters across? Okay, so if I had sort of a 90 centimeter channel down the middle for me to walk and move, then 2.3, that's terrible maths, isn't it? You've got about 70 centimetres at the floor, but obviously as it comes up you've got slightly less. So I have various options of the way I could lay it. So I could have it so that I am more to one side, and then that would give me one side, this side, with a board over here, or I go for the majority of my boards running the length going between the struts, and then obviously at the end part I've got a bigger space. So from this strut to the wall is about 1 metre, so I would be able to get a sort of metre deep, 3 metre wide board at the very ends. Okay, I still have one strut to think about and how I sort of avoid that with the track. When you look online, there are a number of layouts where they have the strutted roof and they literally just do a supporting beam across and then lay the boards across it. So it's effectively a one deck, but because I wanted to do it in 3 decks, I need to think about how the height of them comes in and they sort of stack up. I'll show you a bit more of that in a drawing. Like everybody else's loft, I also need to put some storage up here, so I need to allow for some space underneath. So I'm allowing about 60 centimetres of height, which will give me plenty of storage space underneath my layout. So lightings just at the moment is 1, but obviously with the deck system I'll need to light each deck from above, probably get better lighting, so I don't need to worry too much about the room lighting, but there will be a lot of deck lighting to install. Probably got to think about a bit of insulation as well, extra, and the biggest challenge of all is how to get the boards in and the struts. So the gap between one strut to another is about 60 centimetres. So I found that the maximum board you can sort of comfortably get in and swing around is probably about 1.5 metres. Anything longer than that, it just becomes a bit cumbersome to get it in between the struts. So I suppose a good point to end up here. Health and safety. So yeah, need to get fire extinguisher up here, proper electrics wired in, and I need to deal with this. It's about 52 centimetres wide and 1.2 metres long. I quite like my legs. They're not the prettiest legs in the world, but I haven't managed to break them yet. I don't really want to do that. I need a trapdoor so that when I'm up here it's safe for me to walk up and down. I don't need to worry about it, but so that also I can easily get out. So yeah, some sort of counter-weighted trapdoor needs installing. So obviously the initial thing was just to draw everything up. So I've drawn up all the position of all the struts, heights and distances between. I'm not too worried about the angles because when I then plot it all out, they'll be sort of become self-evident. And obviously I've done the as you go along where each of the struts are. So there's about 17 of them and the distance between them. Okay, so as I'm going to have to redesign various parts for the roof, it seems sensible to draw this up in Inkscape just so that I had an accurate drawing I could go back to with all the right dimensions. So I've effectively taken the measurements up to the struts, the distance between, the distance at the base, and then the height of the roof in the middle. And using that, I then can join up the points, which gets me my roof strut frame. So I haven't had to measure any angles. Inkscape's not easy if you're creating triangles. I'm still struggling with that bit. It's very much, you just drag and draw a square or oblong. But you can create sort of free shapes, which allows me to create the red struts. So if I take away my dimensions, what I'm left with
Here's the space that I need to fill. So what I'll look at next is how I can fit my 3-decked layout within these areas between the struts. So the simplest structure would be an E structure, where I've got 3 decks, and this would sit on a raised up plinth at about, what do I say, it was about 50 centimetres high, so I could get storage underneath. But it didn't seem to make up the best use of the space, so that it would be quite an easy structure to make. So version 2 obviously sits on a wider base, and I would have 600mm wide decks on the lower 2, and I'd get about 450 on the top one, with also the option to have a line running in front of the rafters on the lower deck. However, I still couldn't work out how I would get from one deck to the next, and it wasn't using up best use of the space at the side. So the third design, which is again a lot larger again, so I'd need a bigger plinth. So I could have my 600 wide again on the lower 2 decks. Probably gave me about 500 on the top one. And then these yellow platforms are effectively where my inclines rise from one deck to the next. So the height from one deck to the next is 400mm, which means I need about a 20 meter incline with a 2 degrees incline rate. So the only thing I still got to try and work out is, as you get to near to the next deck, I need to change the arrangement so that the lines could pass through the gap. But I'm going to make up a template of both of these just to see how easy it is to access inside each layer and how much sort of viewing I would have to then decide what to build. Okay, so for looking at Amersham Station, the easiest place to start is Google Earth. So today it's quite different from how I remember it as a teenager. So I'm recreating my first journey on my own. So I was 17, so I'm in the end of the first year of sixth form, and I travelled from Amersham up to London, then on the underground through to probably King's Cross, I think, where I then probably got a train up to Leeds to see my sister, and back again. So my parents drove me to Amersham, and off I set. So certain things are still obviously the same, and I'll include them in the layout. So we've got the typical sort of 2-platform canopy structure at Amersham. So at Wendover, the second canopy had been demolished, we think in sort of the 50s, but at Amersham it still has the 2 canopies, and again the long building and then the smaller building at the side. There's also the latticed footbridge across between the 2. This one's just one of the newer bridges that have been put in with lifts for disabled access, so I won't be including that because that wouldn't have occurred at the time. This is sort of a thin footbridge which allowed you to get around to the front, but you could also access platform 2 from it, and there used to be a guy stood taking your tickets so that you to make sure that if you were leaving that way that you had the right to, and then that leads you to another car park. So when I was 17, none of this existed. This was a car park area, and then the old goods depot was still here. It was fenced off, but you could see it in the car park, and I'm going to include that, and I'll show a picture of it later on. And then the other feature I want to include is these two bridges as you approach. So if I drop myself, so you've got the original 2-track bridge, and then this single track bridge that was built in the 50s when they electrified the line out to Amersham for the underground. I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. And then as you came up, there's a mini roundabout, and then I remember a pub here called the Iron Horse, which I will include. So, and then if I can get around the corner, another little roundabout in front of the station. So a bit like Wendover, you still got the long building. It's sort of typical of all the ones along the line to Aylesbury. So, courtesy of the Metroland website, I got some great images I can show you of Amersham with the electrification of the line back in the 50s. So this is where they were extending electrified line out from, I can't remember if it was Chelmsford, Latimer or Rickmansworth, but it was certainly closer to London. And in order to do it, they had to drop in an extra line. So the original 2 lines up and down to London are running here, which go into obviously platform 1 and 2, and they created a third platform 3 and dropped in this extra line. I think they had to build up the embankment as well. And the other significant thing they did is they obviously demolished the old signal box. So a lot of the sort of classic red and white signal boxes that you often see people who model the underground is sort of like this. So there is an example of it still at Chesham station, where they still have the original small signal box. It's very pretty. But Amersham got this monstrous beast of the Westinghouse new lever frame, which I'll show you more of later. So that's the newer part. I mentioned about the old goods station, the goods yard building you could see in the distance, which was near the car park. So that's a sort of an image of it. And then if you look the other way, so again this is platform 3. I always used to stand here and wonder what this structure was, because it just looked like it had been clipped onto the side of the original building, which in fact it obviously had, because that made a lot of sense. So there was the columns from the original canopy, and then these extra columns stuck on, which is basically just holding this clip-on roof canopy over platform 3. And as you can see, that's where they've built the embankment up, and they're putting in the extra bridge. So just to complete the changes to the Metropolitan line with the electrification to Amersham. So this is the original line. So you had Harrow on the Hill, and then you could travel out on the underground at this point up to Rickmansworth, where you then have to change onto, I presume, a steam train that would then take you out to Aylesbury or Chesham. So they put in an extra line for the Chiltern line effectively now, that runs behind all the underground stations, and the only one you after Harrow on the Hill you stop, the next one you stop at is Moor Park, and then you then sort of rejoins back up to the 2-track, but you can stop at all the stations, whether or not you're on the Underground or on the Chiltern line. And obviously the Underground then also runs out to Chesham and terminates at Amersham. So that's where my Underground is going to start. But because my Underground is DCC and my Chiltern line is DC, I will need to have 3 lines running from Amersham down to London. I'll explain a bit more of that in a minute. But this site's really good, so I'll put a link in below for anybody who's interested, and it's definitely worth having a look at the Metroland.org site. It's been really useful and helpful to me, so really appreciate that. So as I explained at the beginning, one of the things I wanted to do with Amersham is to model more of the infrastructure around the station. And one of the things I also remember very distinctive is Amersham bus garage. So, which this one must be from the 50s, it looks like. And obviously you can see the London Transport roundel. So it seemed fitting to include it, and I've got a more modern picture. It's quite an unusual building, and so I'm probably going to just use one of the Skelsines bus depot for the time being. But this building's not by the station. It's actually down the hill in Old Amersham, quite a way from the Underground station. So it was based here as you came down the hill from Beaconsfield, where there is now a Tesco superstore. So they demolished it and built a Tesco's, but I'm going to include it anyway because I like it, so I'll probably have it over this side. And then the last thing I think I'll include, so as I said, there's the Iron Horse pub. I'll probably put like a garage, because I vaguely remember a garage being here, but I may have confused it with another station along the line. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I need to explain about what I'm going to build. Probably the easy thing to do now is just go to the board and I'll show you with the tracks how it's going to lay out.
So, starting the build of Amersham, excited to get onto another board. So, as I said, I'm 17, taking my first solo train journey from Amersham up to Leeds to see my sister at Leeds University. So as I explained, there's 3 tracks at Amersham. So you've got the original Great Central, Great Western, I'm going to have to remember what it is, the Chiltern line as I always call it. So you've got the 2 original tracks from the Chiltern line, the up and the down. And obviously they've now included a new line to allow the down line from Marylebone, and then so that's going to be on platform 3. I've got my up line to Marylebone, which will be on platform 2, and then my DCC London Underground line, which will be on platform 1. So that's how I'm going to keep the 2 DC and DCC separate. And at Amersham, the trains will just have 1 line to come in and out of. I sort of vaguely remember there are 3 lines. There was some sort of storage area for further trains beyond the station. And so I'll extend the London Underground line over the bridge as well. Then it will give me the capacity to hold an extra train, so I can probably have 2 trains sort of parked at Amersham for the start of the day. If you're wondering what I've got on the stock, so obviously I've got my DC old triangle that I've painted up, which I showed in one of the earlier episodes. This is my new, the new London Transport stock for Heathrow. So that's the new one that came out in January. It looks really nice, goes really well. And if you've ever watched any of my earlier ones, so there's one called Static to Motorised. So this is where I've taken the London Transport static models, which I'd bought last year on eBay. So I think I got these, got 4 carriages for 70 quid, which I thought was a pretty good bargain, as they're going for silly money at the moment. And I've converted these over using the Bachmann spares, so basically the chassis, the bogies, the motor, the internal lights, everything you can buy on the Bachmann website, and you basically just convert over the carriage shell. So I've effectively got 3 little trains of 2 that I can run, and then obviously I've still got the red 1930s stock as well. I've got 2 sets of those. So what have I got to build on the board? So this will be where the bridge will go through. So obviously I need to cut down so that I can have the bridge road underneath going past the tracks. It'll come up to the roundabout. I'm going to simplify it down to just one roundabout. I'm going to have my Amersham bus station about here, so slightly different. The Iron Horse pub will go here, which was the sort of spot it is in, as you can see it as you come out under the bridge. Then I'm going to have a garage, sort of mechanic garage, and then it will lead through to my car park and the old engine shed at the other end. But I'll start with building Amersham main station. So I've got the main building and then the start of the first of the large canopies that spans from the station building to the platform edge. And later on obviously be the couple of bridges at the other end and the new signal box. Okay, so that's everything for this time. I appreciate it. Again, it's another long one, but I'm quite pleased to be getting back onto another board. And next time I'll go through some of the things I sort of felt I did well with Wendover and I didn't, so that I'm trying to learn as I go on. This is the whole point of doing a repeat board for each part of the layout, rather than trying to build the whole thing in one go. But as always, thank you for watching. I don't ask people to like and subscribe because it's just, that's what YouTube is all about. But I have just been overwhelmed by the number of people who have viewed, commented, subscribed and liked. So thank you all, I really appreciate it. It does encourage me to keep going and documenting this build. So anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, maybe I'll catch you next time. Cheers.